Good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Marty Ross, and this is another Conversations with Marty Ross MD, coming to you live from Seattle, Washington, where we've been having some sunshine here, but it looks like the rain is starting to set back in. And I know that various parts of the U.S. here are still under snow, so it's quite a difference here, but we've had some sunshine and weather's in the 50s out here, so it's been kind of nice. For those of you that are new to the webinar, welcome. I'm glad to see some new names showing up on my participant list. That's good to see you. And I know there's a number of new people that have come back again for some more information. So I'm glad to see many familiar names as well tonight too. It's always good to see people that I recognize. The way that these webinars work, you create them with your questions. And so no two webinars are the same. Sometimes we get into a theme of the night. We'll have to see where your questions take us tonight. But the way you write your questions is over here on the bottom, over there on the right-hand side of the screen at the bottom is a chat box. And you write your question to me in that chat box. The only thing I ask is do not hit enter until your whole question is complete. If you hit enter a number of times, it creates multiple questions that get hard for me to actually track from my end over here. As we're doing the webinar tonight, I am creating a recording. And that should be available to you by around 6 to 6:30 a.m. Seattle time tomorrow morning, so that you'll be able to go ahead and view that. And you can find it in a number of places. Number one, you can find it on my YouTube channel. Number two, you could find it at Marty Ross MD Supplements on the homepage at the bottom. I insert the video recording there, and that URL is treatlyme.com. You can also find it at Treat Lyme. By Marty Ross MD, I'm renaming the Treat Lyme book as Treat Lyme now. That's what it's going to be called from now on. And I actually just put the new logo up tonight. It actually isn't looking quite right. I got to work on it a little bit more. And soon you're going to see a new website coming to handle that information a little bit better too. I'm currently getting that redesigned. But for now, it's still Treat Lyme. What used to be called the Treat Lyme book, I have now renamed as Treat Lyme by Marty Ross MD, and we'll look at a number of resources on there tonight as well too for you. So you can find it on the webinars page there, the webinars recording page tomorrow. You can find it there, and you'll get a link of that in the email as well too. During the webinar tonight, I'm going to post your questions on the screen so everybody can see them, but I will read them because sometimes in the recorded version it gets to be a little bit hard to see those questions. Okay. So with no further ado, I think we'll go ahead and get started here. And first question is from Oscar. Hello, Oscar. Let's see. I'm on minocycline 3 times 100 milligrams, 1 in the AM, 2 in the afternoon or in the PM, and rifampin 300 milligrams once a day for Lyme and Bartonella. I will be adding Bactrim 800 milligram twice a day and stop rifampin in 10 days. Plan is to add Tindamax 4 weeks after starting Bactrim. I'm having a hard time with the 300 milligrams of Mino per day. What is your, I think there's a second part. I think you said, what is your opinion? There it is. What is your opinion? I see you finished the question. All right. So in terms of this treatment, so Oscar is using right now minocycline and rifampin to treat Lyme and Bartonella, and eventually is going to be changing over to minocycline and Bactrim, which will be more primarily for Bartonella only. So let me talk about that. So Oscar, I don't know whether, you said for Lyme and you're being treated for Lyme and Bartonella. Okay, so that treatment using the 2 antibiotics, minocycline, rifampin, is a very good antibiotics to treat Bartonella. In fact, rifampin is one of the better agents we have, and it's helped by the minocycline. And I give that a chance of helping you of about 80 to 85%, which is as good as any 2 antibiotic combination. Okay, so that's a good combination for Bartonella. It is also a good combination for Lyme in that the minocycline treats 2 of the 3 ways that Lyme lives in you. Lyme lives in you as a spirochete. That's the corkscrew looking thing that you've seen pictures of on the internet. It also lives inside of your cells as something called intracellular Lyme. And then there's a microscopic cyst form of the germ too. Minocycline helps treat intracellular and spirochete Lyme. The rifampin that you're taking is useful also for the cyst form of the Lyme germ, which is the third form of the Lyme germ. Okay, so while you're doing minocycline rifampin, you've got Lyme covered, and you also have Bartonella covered. All right, now that rifampin and a minocycline for Lyme will work about 85 to 90% of the time, which is as good as any antibiotic combination might work for Lyme as well too. Okay. In terms of the dosing of your minocycline, I'm not quite sure why they're doing 100 milligrams and 200 milligrams. And if your difficulty is nausea on the minocycline, I think you could do just as well by being on 100 milligrams twice a day. I don't think you need to do as high of a dose on that second time. All right. All right. Then when you switch over to Bactrim, rifampin, and Tindamax, that is a combination that works well for Lyme and for Bartonella too. On that combination, the Bactrim minocycline is your Bartonella treatment. That works as well as a rifampin minnow combination, and that works about 80 to 85% of the time. And then the Tindamax, minocycline, and Bactrim also is a Lyme germ treatment too. Okay, so the minocycline, as I said, treats spirochete and intracellular Lyme. Tindamax is useful for treating cyst forms of the Lyme germ, and also, according to some petri dish experiments that were published a number of years ago, can remove biofilm slime layers on that Lyme forms as well too. Okay. That Bactrim is an interesting addition that I'm starting to use more and more for Lyme too. It wasn't something I was using for my Lyme germ treatments. For Bartonella, yes, but not for my Lyme germ treatments until probably about 6, maybe 9 months ago, when there started to be some research coming out showing that it might help with persister cells that can form in Lyme disease. So what are persisters? Well, there's been some research showing that when you're on antibiotics for a while, some of the Lyme germs will slow their metabolism way down and kind of go into hibernation. And in a hibernation state, they can ignore the antibiotics, okay? So there's some petri dish experiments that are being done, that have been done out of Johns Hopkins University by Ying Zhang. And his research is showing that sulfa antibiotics like Bactrim can be one way of combating persister cells. These cells that have slowed their metabolism way down. And so by adding that Bactrim in to your Lyme germ treatment, it's a way of helping with persister Lyme. I think there may be some stronger ways of helping with it, but that is a way of doing it. So how do I like your treatment? I like it well, actually, either one of these things that you're doing or where you're going. However, if you're having tolerance problems, I would decrease the amount of that minocycline that you're taking. Now, I don't know what side effect you're having to be able to comment more specifically, but generally you might just be able to tolerate it better if you can lower that dose to 100 milligrams in the morning and 100 milligrams at night, okay? Now, earlier or last week, I posted up a new article about how to treat persister Lyme. So if you want to read more about persister Lyme, you may want to take a look at the article that I've written about that. Because there's different ways of managing this idea of persistence. It's a little too small here. I got to work on the sizing of it, but that's the new logo. And eventually this whole website's going to be redesigned to make it more user-friendly, okay? But in terms of where you would find this article, take a look at infection treatment plans. And in there, you'll see this article I wrote called How to Treat Persister Lyme, What Works. And I review 3 different ways that I'm generally trying to treat persister Lyme, Lyme which becomes more difficult to treat because it's gone into hibernation, okay? So take a look at that article for much more information about that. Let me go back here. All right. So, Oscar, I hope that gave you some useful information, and good luck to you. Hello, Jeannie. Let's see. Is there a way you can tell the difference between Lyme and fibromyalgia? Sometimes it's really different. It's a good question. So fibromyalgia, everyone, is a condition where you have a lot of muscle achiness, all right? And in addition, you can often have fatigue. And in addition, you can have brain dysfunction. And in addition, you can have sleep disturbances. In other words, it can look just like Lyme disease does, all right? So the only real way to distinguish it is to see, do you have anything else suggesting Lyme disease? Okay, so number one, if you've got, and so then let me say one other thing too. So in my practice here in Seattle, Washington, before I started treating Lyme disease back in 2004, my practice was almost exclusively devoted to treating people that had chronic fatigue syndrome and fibromyalgia. Okay, that's how I got into treating Lyme, actually. And that's because in 2004, one of my patients asked me to test her for Lyme disease. And I actually was very unknowledgeable about Lyme disease at that time. And I did a test for her. I did a DNA test called a PCR test to see if she had the DNA of the Lyme in her. Now, mind you, that test is only useful at finding Lyme 30% of the time, but that's what I did. And it came back positive. And so that got me thinking a little bit. I thought, I wonder how many of my patients that I've diagnosed with chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia actually have Lyme disease, all right? So I went ahead and tested all of my patients by doing a Western blot, and at that time, the Western blot through IGeneX, the lab IGeneX. And what I discovered in my practice in Seattle, Washington, is that 30% of my patients that I had previously diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome and fibromyalgia actually had Lyme disease, okay? All right, so how do you figure out if what is being called fibromyalgia is actually Lyme? Well, you consider four different things. And basically, you go through the steps of diagnosing Lyme. So the first thing you consider is there a risk you could have gotten Lyme? All right. So if you have a known tick bite, that increases your risk of having Lyme. But 50% of the time that people have tick bite or have Lyme, they don't remember a tick bite. So it's still possible to have Lyme, not have a tick bite. Then you start thinking about, are you doing activities that could put you near ticks, okay, where you might get this? Do you live in an area with lots of Lyme? So for instance, New Jersey is loaded with Lyme. The East Coast is loaded with Lyme. Northern California, 40% of ticks carry Lyme, all right? Are you a hunter? Are you a backpacker, an outdoor person? So you consider, do you have the risk of getting Lyme, all right? Second thing we look at is, do you have a lot of symptoms that suggest Lyme? And then third thing I look at is physical exam findings, and generally fibro and Lyme can look pretty similar. And then finally, is there a positive test, okay? And so there's various ways that you can test for Lyme, but I would get a good Lyme test. If you're wondering what I consider to be the best way, I actually consider either doing a Western blot through IGeneX or their new immunoblot as the best test. And to give you more information about those tests and why I consider the immunoblot and the Western blot to be the best test, I'm not going to cover that right now, but take a look in the Treat Lyme book, and I'm going to go there right now. My chapter on test. And here's my article called A Review of Lyme Infection Tests, Pass or Fail, where I review the best ways to test for Lyme. The other thing that you ought to take a look at is my chapter on how to diagnose, right here. And in here, I've got a 30-minute video article with slideshows about how do you diagnose Lyme. What are the things you consider that really point out that this is Lyme disease? And I would take a look at that. It gives you a lot of good information. This is one of my free articles. And it's a great way of trying to figure out, do you have Lyme disease? It's more detailed than the time I have to explain right now about how do you diagnose Lyme. Okay? All right. Let me go back here. All right, Jeannie, thank you for that question. Good luck to you. It's a great question. Oh, as I said, out here in Seattle, probably 30% of people that carry the diagnosis of Lyme actually have, or have fibromyalgia or chronic fatigue syndrome, probably have Lyme. It could be higher on the East Coast because Lyme is so much more prevalent out there. New Jersey studies tell us that about 95% of ticks in New Jersey carry Lyme. There's a lot of Lyme disease out east, and probably a lot of people that are being misdiagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome and fibromyalgia that actually have Lyme disease, okay? All right. Hello, Tom. Let's see. My Lyme literate medical doctor has placed me on nystatin, doxy, and Alinea for Lyme, yeast, and possible parasites due to intestinal symptoms I have had. I'm starting the Alinea tomorrow, but some have cautioned, some have cautioned its effect on the liver and need for detoxing. What has been your experience with it clinically? Thanks. So I, in using Alinea, and I use it to treat intestinal parasites. Occasionally, I will use it as part of my Lyme treatments because, in theory, the way that it works, it should be able to actually treat the Lyme infection. It treats what are known as anaerobic organisms, germs that don't require oxygen to live, like a lot of the stuff that lives in your intestines and even Lyme, okay? So the biggest problem you're going to run into with Alinea is that if you have Lyme or if you have parasites, you might get something called a Herxheimer reaction, all right? So Herxheimer reaction, what happens in that is if you are killing certain germs, not all germs, but when you kill Lyme, if you kill yeast, if you kill parasites, if you kill viruses sometimes, often you can get Herxheimer reaction. And so what happens in a Herxheimer reaction is the immune system sees the dead bug parts and the toxins that get released from the inside of the germs and reacts by making more inflammation chemicals called cytokines. Now, many of you that have participated in my webinars know, and if you've read Treat Lyme by Marty Ross MD, or what I used to call the Treat Lyme book, you know how big of an issue cytokines is, okay? So let me just tell you briefly about cytokines. So cytokines are made by white blood cells when they see an infection, and they're good and bad. On the good side, they cause more white blood cells to be made, they draw those white blood cells where the infection is, and they help them work better. But the problem is in Lyme, and sometimes in parasites, and sometimes in mold toxicity issues, and sometimes in yeast overgrowth in the intestines. The immune system doesn't do a good job getting rid of those, and it tries harder and harder by making more and more cytokines, okay? And what can eventually happen is it makes too many cytokines. And too many cytokines give you problems. They make it so you can't think. They disturb your sleep centers. They make you hurt all over. They give you fatigue. Basically, what we call Lyme symptoms are really too many cytokine symptoms, okay? Or excess cytokine symptoms, all right? So now, if you start killing germs and the immune system sees them and makes more cytokines, which is called a Herx reaction, guess what gets worse? All of those excess cytokine symptoms. So more fatigue, more body pain, more problems thinking, worsened neuropathies, anything you have already could get worse as you start killing things with Alinea. That's a Herxheimer reaction, okay? Now, some people may call that being harsh on the liver or a toxin problem, but it's not. It's an issue of too many cytokines, all right? Now, when I've done Alinea, I have done liver testing before. I have not seen anyone develop elevated liver enzymes suggesting true liver inflammation. So I don't think people get liver problems on Alinea. I do think they can have problems with toxin overload and Herxheimer reactions, okay? So what I suggest doing, excuse me just a minute here. Swallowed down the wrong hatch there. So what I suggest doing is to tolerate your Alinea is two things. Number one, be on herbs that lower cytokines, all right? And my favorite way of lowering cytokines to manage Herxheimer reactions is to be on the herb curcumin. I like using a liposomal variety of curcumin. That's curcumin that's microscopically wrapped in fat. Curcumin is a derivative or a component of turmeric, okay, the Indian seasoning turmeric. And if you eat turmeric or curcumin raw, it doesn't get well absorbed. That's why you want to have it as a liposomal variety, okay? And you want to take 500 milligrams 3 times a day. If you Herx, you want to double that to 2 pills 3 times a day. And if you're Herxing, you might also want to add some glutathione, all right? So glutathione is the master antioxidant that is made in every cell in our body, and it's made in very high concentrations in the liver where it's used to pull toxins out, and it can help prevent liver inflammation as well too. But for that, I also like using a liposomal variety because the liposomal variety is better absorbed. Otherwise, glutathione is not that well absorbed on its own, okay? And so you would get a liposomal glutathione, and you want to take about 400 to 500 milligrams of that 1 or 2 times a day, all right? But in and of itself, I don't think Alinea is hard on the liver. Rather, you may get a Herx reaction, and some people think that means the liver is having a hard time. It's not. It's a Herx reaction, okay? All right. So in terms of liposomal products that I just mentioned, let me do a quick screen share here for you. supplements. If you're wondering, when I mentioned supplements tonight, you're wondering, well, what's a good brand or quality? Take a look at my store, Marty Ross MD Supplements. It's at treatlyme.com. And you can just do a generic search. So if you want to know about curcumin, what do I carry that's curcumin? You would just go ahead and search there. And the liposomal variety I carry is actually this Mariva 500. This is my favorite product for that. Okay. So you would find that it's a Thorne product. All right. And then the other, in terms of glutathione, or you're trying to figure out what is the liposomal glutathione that I would suggest, just search glutathione, and you're going to see these products by Research Nutritionals, which is the Trifortify products. Okay. So take a look there. That'll give you that information that you need there. Okay. I think that handles it. Oh, if you're wanting to know what brands do I think are good quality ones, take a look at my supplements tab here. Just do that. And then over here in this manufacturer area, these are supplement brands that tend to be sold out of doctors' offices. And most of us use them because they have good quality records. They actually are sourcing for active ingredients that tend to work best, and they don't include a lot of artificial fillers, okay? So in a sense, at my Marty Ross MD Supplements, I have curated the best options in supplements for you to get better from Lyme that also will not hurt you, all right? So take a look at my options here. Anyone could buy from this site as well too, all right? Let me go back here. Question. Hello, Eric. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Ross. How do I take transfer factors to boost my immune system? Okay, so they're transfer factors, everyone. Let me try to explain what transfer factors are. So to do that, I want to divide the immune system into two parts. Okay, now this is not a textbook explanation. This is a Marty Ross MD explanation, all right? So for the purposes of describing transfer factors, I'm going to divide the immune system into the detectives and the army, all right? It kind of probably says what describes adequately what they do, all right? So in the detectives are the type of white blood cells that can tell if an infection is there. But they're not able to fight the battle. They have to give information to the army over here, all right? One of the things that they make to tell the army to get ready to fight a battle is they make cytokines. And in the right amount, cytokines turn the army on, okay? But in excess, like in Lyme, they actually start suppressing the army, okay? All right. The other thing that these detective cells make is they make transfer factors. And transfer factors tell the immune system to target the right germs, basically. So any germ that is in us, our immune system will make transfer factors against that germ. So there are Borrelia, Lyme transfer factors, for instance, okay? And there are transfer factors for viruses. There's transfer factors for colds. There's transfer factors for strep throat, all right? So every kind of germ that's in us, there are specific transfer factors against it, all right? So in terms of transfer factors, the company that's done a good job of providing transfer factors for the various infections that we might see in Lyme disease is Research Nutritionals. And they've got a number of different transfer factor products. And then within the next month, keep a lookout at Treat Lyme by Marty Ross MD. Again, that was the Treat Lyme book. I'm rebranding it as Treat Lyme by Marty Ross MD. And you're going to see an article I'm going to be putting together about which transfer factors do you use for which time, which transfer factor products by Research Nutritionals work for certain situations, okay? So specifically, they have one that's called Transfer Factor L+. And Transfer Factor L+ has in it transfer factors against Lyme, Borrelia, Lyme, okay, Bartonella, Babesia, Ehrlichia, Anaplasma, okay, so Lyme and the co-infections. Also against something called cytomegalovirus, Epstein-Barr virus, human herpes virus type 6. These are viruses that don't necessarily come from the ticks, but they live in us and might get more active when we have Lyme. Also in transfer factor L+, are transfer factors against chlamydia pneumoniae and mycoplasma pneumoniae. And again, those are bacteria that live even in healthy people, but in people with Lyme might get more active. And so transfer factor L plus has transfer factors in it against those, okay? That's the most targeted mix of transfer factors you can get against Lyme and the kind of infections that occur in Lyme, all right? Now, there also is another transfer factor product that sometimes people for Lyme might, and you take that as one pill twice a day, okay? Now, if you happen to have mold toxicity issues, you might want to try their transfer factor Enviro that has transfer factors in it against various mold toxins. And I would do that as one pill twice a day. If you happen to have a different chronic virus infections that have become active in your illness, you might want to try transfer factor Plasmic, and that's PLS MYC, and that has in it transfer factors, I think, against, I haven't looked at this in a while, I think 12 to 15 different viruses that can be common infections that can occur in healthy people but get more active in Lyme, okay? And pay attention to the article coming up. I'll list out what those viruses are, but you want to do that also as one pill twice a day, okay? So those are the thr+, major transfer factors: transfer factor Enviro, transfer factor Plasmic, and transfer factor L+, okay? Those are the three that I would focus on right now with you. Pay attention to my upcoming article. Sometime within the next month, it should be ready and out for you to take a look at as well, too, okay? All right. Good luck to you, Eric. Thank you for that question. Let's see. Eric, I guess this is you again, or a different Eric. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Marty. First of all, it's great to be back with you. Good. Nice to see you back. I don't know if you were the same Eric I was just talking to. Thank you so much for standing up for the patients and taking a stand against the CDC. You're welcome. My first question is, what supplements or treatments do you recommend for low dopamine levels? Well, that one I don't know. Every now and then I do get stumped here, and that one I don't. One thing I have done in my practice, I used to do testing for neurotransmitter levels, and I suspect what's happened is you've had testing to see what your neurotransmitter levels are. And I used to do testing for that, and at one time I might have known what to take exactly for dopamine levels. But I will have to share with you that when I used to do that testing, and I used to have my patients take products to correct the different levels, I never found it to be that helpful. They may have corrected their levels, but it didn't make any major difference in the end. And so I'm not a big fan of going after and correcting neurotransmitters in Lyme, just because I've not seen it to make major differences in how a person does. Okay? That's just what I've seen in my practice. All right? All right. Thanks for that question, Eric. Good luck to you. Hello, Maureen. Let's see. I'm on Mimosa pudica for parasites. I've heard it also get rid of candida also. Would I need to still take nystatin? I'm not taking antibiotics at this time. I don't know that I would call it the best agent for yeast. I probably would take nystatin. I think there are better yeast formulations. It might be helpful for parasites. I will tell you, parasites, the herbs you might use would be like things like black walnut. You could use the mimosa here. I generally don't find they work that well. I find for parasites that they may help about 40% of the time. Often for parasites, I'm resorting to using Alinea, that prescription I talked about earlier tonight, 500 milligrams twice a day for 3 weeks. Okay, that's just what I have found in my practice. When it comes to herbal alternatives for yeast, my preference is to use products that have a number of things in them. One product I like using is a product called Capri Plus by a company called Karuna. It has in it caprylic acid, some garlic, and some rosemary oil. I find that works really well. Usually still takes about 3 months to get rid of yeast. You would use 2 pills 3 times a day. Another product I've been using with some success is Biocidin. Biocidin comes in 3 formulations. Comes as drops, comes as a pill, comes as a pump that you put under your tongue. It's a liposomal variety. Biocidin has about 10 different herbs in it, including tea tree oil, garlic, some rosemary oil. Those are things that can be very useful against yeast. And they break down yeast biofilms according to some research that we have on that too. Also, those herbs can be useful against treating Lyme, including biofilms from Lyme, and the components of biocidin have been shown to be successful at blocking a defense mechanism that Lyme uses, where Lyme develops these efflux pumps, where it literally pumps antibiotics or herbal antibiotics that have gotten to the inside of the Lyme germ out. It's a tricky germ. It just comes up with all these ways of defending itself, okay? So I have a whole article on biocidin, because you should take a look at it and see which form would be better for you, whether it's to use the biocidin LSF or the biocidin drops. And I tell you how to use that biocidin in it too. It's a free article. I'll show it to you here in a minute. But I like biocidin as an option for treating Lyme, even parasites, because it's got black walnut hull in it. Although, again, I would say it only works about 40% of the time in parasites, and it can treat yeast well too. So you may want to take a look at that. Finally, another product I like using for treating yeast, that's herbal product, is a product by Integrative Therapeutics called Phytostan. And Phytostan has in it some powder caprylic acid, rosemary oil, thyme oil. I believe undolinic acid is in that as well too. And that you would use as 2 pills twice a day too. Okay. Let me just show you that quick do a quick screen share so I can show you the article that on the biocidin has become one of my go-to herbs. I especially am using it when people need to get off antibiotics for a while, or as a standalone agent to treat Lyme, or for when I've got yeast and Lyme, because it seems to be a help with both of those, okay? So take a look. I think it's in my free reads. And yep, there it is. So it's one of these articles that is available for free. And I talk about the science that I've been able to review on this. It's a very impressive product. Okay. So I take a look at that. All right, let me go back here. Hello, Rose. Let's see. What is your experience or knowledge about using low-dose immunotherapy to treat Lyme with Dr. Ty Vincent uses with his Lyme patients? So, I have used LDI in my practice, and I have a few patients I still use it with, but I have become, and those few patients I think have gotten some benefit, but it's not one of my favorite things to do anymore. And low-dose immunotherapy was very popular about a year and a half ago when Ty Vincent and his ideas broke onto the scene, okay? In fact, LDI, or low-dose immunotherapy, became an IT treatment of the year. And in fact, in Lyme, we see that all the time. There are certain treatments that become the thing that everybody tries because somebody had some success with it, okay? About 2 or 3 years ago, everyone was using essential oils to treat Lyme. And eventually we discovered that probably didn't work. That was the IT season treatment back then. And then what came after that was low-dose immunotherapy became an IT treatment too. So the idea with low-dose immunotherapy is that, and I have a whole article on it as well too. In fact, I'll tell you what I'm going to do, because I just don't find it to be generally that useful. I'll make a few comments and then I'll steer you to the article where you can read about the ins and outs of it, okay? About why it works and how you would do it, etc. But generally, what I have found is that generally more people get hurt by it than helped. And in addition, often it doesn't work at all. But there are a few people that do get help. And it's a way of using microscopic, maybe even homeopathic doses of Lyme germ parts to change how the immune system is responding to Lyme, so that you have less Lyme symptoms. However, it doesn't get rid of the germs, okay? And even if you're doing it, I still think that people need to be on antibiotics at the same time. So having said that, I don't want to take a lot of time going over it because it just isn't one of those things I find most useful. I'm going to direct you to an article that I've written about the ins and outs of why it could work, okay? But just know that my experience now is I'm tending not to use it on people. I used to even get all the products here in my office. I think there's 2 people I manage on it anymore just because they did have benefit, and they do keep having benefit. But the majority of people probably are not getting benefit, and there's a great risk of getting hurt by people using too high of a dose with you initially. All right, those are just some quick comments. Let me do a screen share to show that article to you. Take a look at in my chapters and look in the immune system chapter, and take a look at this article called LDI, Bring on the Regulators. Okay, it explains the ins and outs of it, but I will tell you, my experience says, since using it over time, it is something I don't find many people getting benefit from. All right, let me go back here. Good luck to you. Hello, Margaret. Let's see. If a person has a relapse, should she or he go back on the same antibiotics as she was on before? Good question. So, first of all, if somebody starts having Lyme treated a year or more after they got the germ, after they got infected, I do not think that the majority of those people ever get rid of their germs. Okay, there may be an occasional person that does, but even when we're done treating, the germ probably still lives in you. We cohabitate with that germ. Our immune system can keep it under control. Okay, but even so, the majority of people somewhere over time will have relapses, and probably over the course of about 5 years, most people will have some relapse. All right, now relapse is not a big, bad, hairy thing, the way that initially having Lyme and how sick you can get with Lyme can be. Because if you relapse and you get back into treatment right away, often people are going to recover out of that relapse within about 4 months or so. That's just been what my experience has been, okay? And so, first of all, when I consider somebody might have a relapse, before even deciding it's a relapse, there can be one thing that looks exactly like a relapse that is not a relapse, okay? And that is, you need to consider, from having been on all those antibiotics, did you develop too many yeast in your intestines? All right, and that may sound kind of strange. Why would I focus on yeast, all right? Well, what happens is, because you've been on all those antibiotics, even if you were doing good things to prevent yeast, like being on probiotics, being on nystatin, doing diflucan, whatever it was you were doing to prevent yeast, when you're off those antibiotics, you probably still have an imbalance of good bacteria and yeast, and sometimes those yeast can take over, all right? And if you develop too many yeast in the intestines, it can look just like Lyme disease does, okay? And that is because too many yeast in the intestines trigger the immune system to make too many cytokines. And remember earlier tonight what I said is Lyme disease symptoms are really too many cytokine symptoms, okay? So if you've got a condition like too many yeast in your intestines happening, that can trigger too many cytokines that looks like your Lyme came back. The other thing that too many yeast in the intestines do is they release a toxin called gliotoxin. Gliotoxin is a neurotoxin that can give you confusion and even bring out neuropathies, for instance, too. Okay, so yeast overgrowth can be some pretty serious stuff. So why would you even think about yeast overgrowth? Well, if you've been on antibiotics, you've got a chance of yeast overgrowth, all right? And then the things that would make me think about treating yeast overgrowth first before even looking at treating for using Lyme antibiotics is if you have increased sugar cravings, or if you have a lot of gassiness or bloating, if you're a woman with vaginal itching, vaginal discharge. Sometimes people with yeast will have difficulty swallowing, feel like something gets caught here in the throat. The other thing, interestingly, that happens with too many yeast is if, because of this gliotoxin that they release, that can interact with the skin, making it easier to get pimples and acne, and even eczema and skin rashes may get worse, okay? So if I see a number of those symptoms, I might treat for yeast first before considering to treat for Lyme. And in fact, treat for yeast for about a month, And often what looks like a relapse will go away, and it's not a relapse. It's yeast overgrowth, okay? That's just been what my experience has been. So when somebody comes in looking like they have a relapse, I'm always going to do those questions to figure out, could it be yeast? Okay, now, if it's not yeast, I think you have an option. You can either go back on what worked before. If it's been, let's say, over 6 months or so, probably you can go back on what worked before. I'll do that sometimes. Or I may decide that, if they've had a relapse, I might try a totally different drug combination under the idea that they relapsed on the old one. Maybe they'll do better on something different. Okay, I think you could go either way, to be quite honest with you. However, if the relapse is occurring pretty soon after you stop the antibiotics and you were on those antibiotics for a while, so that to prevent resistance or to make sure that the reason you didn't get better is that your germs had developed some resistance to those antibiotics, if you haven't been off of them for about 6 months or so, I probably would not go back to the same set that you used before. Okay? All right. I'm going to do a quick screen share for you. I want to show you a few things. What to do about Lyme, or what to do about a relapse. Okay, so there's a couple of things you can take a look at. In my chapters, I have a chapter on relapse somewhere. Excuse me. Somewhere. Oh, there it is. Relapse. All right. And so I have a chapter called Is It a Lyme Relapse? Take These Steps. Okay. Read that. That talks through how do you figure out if it's Lyme or yeast, basically. Okay. And then what do you do at the end of treatment to prevent a relapse? I've got all kinds of ideas on that too. Basically, you want to do things to boost your immune system. Take a look at that article as well. All right. Then in terms of yeast, I have a whole chapter on yeast. And in that chapter, here's an article again, how to fix a Lyme treatment crash. Okay. It's about yeast. There's also an article I've written about how do you diagnose yeast. That's this one, a silent problem. Do you have yeast? And then my big article about various ways that you can attack yeast and how do you get rid of them is this one called Kills Yeast, a Brief Guide. Okay. All right. Let me go back here. Let's see here. Hello, Lisa. Let's see. Good evening. I have several random questions. Is there anything that you know of that can suddenly cause palpitations? What are your thoughts about IV silver and hydrogen peroxide? Is Lyme passed through saliva? And finally, is it okay to stay on nystatin all the time? I'll work backwards on those, all right? So nystatin, I leave people on for long periods of time. So nystatin, everyone, is a prescription medicine that stays in the intestine. So it has no toxicity, okay? It doesn't get absorbed into your bloodstream, so therefore it's not going to hurt your kidneys or your liver. So from a toxicity standpoint, yeah, you can stay on that stuff for a long time, okay? Do I find that yeast tend to still keep being treated by it? Does it work effectively for yeast? Yeah. I'll use it for a year, 2 years at a time, okay? All right. Can it be passed through saliva? I don't think so. I don't think we have any science that says that. And that has not been my impression from the ways that I have seen people get in my practice. So I do not think it is transmitted that way. I think it's transmitted through tick bites. It may be transmitted by other vectors like fleas, mites, and flies. It can be transmitted during pregnancy about 50% of the time, unless you're on an antibiotic that prevents that transmission. It might even be transmitted sexually, although the science behind that is very questionable. And I think from a sexual transmission standpoint, maybe 10 to 15% of the time it might be transmitted sexually, meaning most of the time it probably is not. And I know I probably have said a lot of things here that kind of have people thinking, oh no, but I'll show you articles that you can read about to read more my opinion about sexual transmission and how it's transmitted here in a minute. So you can read more information later, okay? But from saliva, I don't think so, okay? IV silver and hydrogen peroxide. So hydrogen peroxide is a form of an oxidizing agent, okay? Other oxidizing agents would be things like UV irradiation of your blood, or ozone treatments would be a form of oxidizing agents too, or very high dose vitamin C, the kind you'd have to get IV, so like 30 to 50 grams of vitamin C. Those are all oxidizing agents. Yeah, vitamin C, which is an antioxidant at low doses, at high doses, at 50 grams, is an oxidizing agent, okay? So oxidizing agents work by damaging the membranes of germs and damaging their DNA. The trouble is they may damage our cell membranes as well too. Now, we make antioxidants, so some people argue that we are protected against the effects of doing oxidizing agents, okay? However, the problem is no one's done studies about the health of people after they've had repeated ozone or repeated vitamin C, high dose vitamin C, or repeated hydrogen peroxide treatments. So I'm kind of cautious about whether it's a good idea to be dumping those poisons in you that might damage your own cell membranes and maybe even over your own DNA. Although I will admit there's studies that on short-term basis say it probably doesn't harm. I'm more concerned about what happens long-term, and no one's done studies to look at the long-term safety of doing these repeatedly, okay? So number one, I'm not a big fan of hydrogen peroxide or oxidizing agent treatments because of a safety issue. Number two, I don't think they work that well. I think when I've seen people that have gotten these treatments, I think they help about 40% of the time, but I think there's better things you can do with herbal antibiotics and with prescription antibiotics, okay? IV silver, silver can kill things. I agree with that. However, I think that's about a 30 to 40% of the time that it will work as well too, okay? All right. What can suddenly cause palpitations? Well, first thing you need to look at is what's going on with your electrolytes, what's going on with your potassium levels, what's going on with your magnesium levels, what's going on with your sodium levels, okay? And that would require a blood test. That is one thing that I would take a look at. You need to get an EKG done so they can look at the pattern of what's happening with the heart, so they can even decide, was there a mini heart attack, for instance, okay? So when you suddenly start developing palpitations, you need some basic blood work done to look at electrolytes, also to look at thyroid levels. Hyperthyroidism, high thyroid, can lead to palpitations too, okay? And probably an EKG if it's happening with some regularity, just to see what is the heart structure, what does the electrical pattern look like. Those are some basic things that you could do, okay? All right, now let's see here. I think I answered your questions there. All right, good luck to you, Lisa. Thank you for those questions. Oh, I know. I wanted to show you my articles about transmission. About transmission. Right here. Right there. Okay, so take a look at my article called How Do People Get Lyme? It's More Than Ticks. And take a look at my article about Lyme being sexually transmitted to figure out, do you need to protect yourself or not? Do you need to protect your partners or not? It's controversial. You can decide by the information by reading it here, okay? And if you are thinking of pregnancy, take a look at Lyme in pregnancy. Can it be transmitted that way too? Okay? All right. Let me go back here. Hello, David. Let's see. Is Biaxin and Malarone a good combo for Lyme and Babesia? Yes, it is. The only thing, so Malarone, everyone, is a anti-malaria medicine. We treat Babesia with malaria medicines because it is a parasite that gets inside red blood cells and acts just like malaria does and responds to malaria medicines, okay? I will tell you the only malaria medicine that's actually been researched to treat babesia, though, is Mepron, also known as atovaquone. And in the research studies, it was coupled with Zithromax. And so it was a 10-day study that showed you can get rid of babesia using Mepron and Zithromax, okay? And because of that one study, often insurance companies will only pay for Zithromax and Mepron for 10 days. All right, so if you happen to get rejected by your insurance company when you're using non-Mepron-based treatments, that's why. Or sometimes they will only cover for a limited period of time. It's because they're saying there's only one study that says it works, and it was only 10 days, okay? And they will tell you Malarone wasn't research, it was only Mepron, okay? Now, Malarone has in it atovaquone, just like the Mepron does, but it has a quinine derivative medicine called Proquinil. And I often will use it as a single agent to get rid of babesia. I think it works quite well on its own. Biaxin will help it though, okay? That's a good treatment for babesia. Biaxin also treats intracellular Lyme, spirochete Lyme. The trouble with this treatment though is you're not doing anything that I think is a good treatment for cyst Lyme. Some of my colleagues are using Malarone for cysts, but I think the data about that is questionable, and I think, in my experience, I think it's questionable if it works too. The one thing that you could add to that treatment, David, to make sure you're picking up the cyst form of Lyme would be to add grapefruit seed extract, and you want to do it as a 250 milligram pill, and you would do one pill 2 times a day. Okay, that would be a nice way to go ahead and make sure you're covering the cyst form of the Lyme germ. All right. In terms of Malarone or Malarone and Biaxin together, that's going to be a babesia regimen. It's going to work about 80 to 85% of the time, which is good as any other possible regimen that you might do. Nothing works 100% of the time. Okay. All right. Good luck to you, David. Hello, Heidi. Let's see. What is the best way to get rid of babesia? I have been told to get rid of parasites and heavy metals first. Who knows? Thanks. So, one option. So there's a whole, Heidi, I have a whole article written about what are the best ways to treat babesia. And one of them could be to do a Malarone 250 milligrams / 100 milligram. That describes the strength of the 2 components that are in it. 1 pill twice a day, and couple it either with a Biaxin 500 milligrams twice a day, or Zithromax 500 milligrams 1 time a day, or minocycline 100 milligrams twice a day, or doxycycline 100 to 200 milligrams twice a day. Along with that Malarone, that works 80 to 85% of the time. All right. There are also some other options, but I would have you read my article. I really lay it out, your options out well there. Okay. All right. Do you need to remove heavy metals first? No. So heavy metals, yes. If you have high heavy metals, they may over time cause your immune system not to work as well. Okay. However, what I have found in terms of all the things you can do to get better from Lyme, like correcting hormones, getting sleep, getting yeast under control, removing toxins, of all the things you can do, even when you have elevated heavy metals, I don't think it makes much difference in terms of lowering them, in terms of what a person's overall outcome is. I'm going to usually go after heavy metals if I'm about 9 months or maybe a year into treatment, and I've taken care of my babesia, I've taken care of my Bartonella, I've gotten people sleeping, I've fixed their adrenals, I've taken care of their thyroid. I've done all those things that you see in my treatment protocol. And after about 9 months to a year and they're still not doing well, then I might consider going after heavy metals. But it's one of those things that I call a low yield chance of helping you. Okay. So let me just talk about in general about Lyme disease and my opinions on things. Okay. So Lyme disease is what's called a total load phenomenon illness. All right. So what happens is there's a number of things collectively going on in a person that add together to make them sick. All right. Or another way of looking at it is a rain barrel analogy, where if you add enough water to a rain barrel, it overflows. All right. And you can look at the individual water drops going in as various types of problems. So for instance, there's a bunch of water going in, that's Lyme. There's a bunch of water going in, raindrops going in, that is heavy metals. There is detox issues, that's a bunch of water drops going in. Yeast is a bunch of the water drops going in. Poor immune function is a bunch of the water drops going in. Poor sleep is a bunch of the water drops going in, okay? Now, you do not need to fix everything to get the rain barrel so it's not overflowing anymore. What you need to fix are the major things that can make a difference, all right? And what you want to do is you want to lower the level of the water so that people's health is good. It doesn't mean you need to empty the rain barrel, all right? So the way you do that is you need to stop having so much stuff go in, and you need to open up the spigot on the bottom so that that rain barrel starts draining, okay? All right, so what are the key things that are going to do that? Well, take a look at my treatment protocol. And so the key things that make most impact are what I have listed in my treatment protocol as the first things that you do in your Lyme. All right, so this is, I call it the Ross Lyme Support Protocol. And I'm just going to kind of walk through it quickly. This is free, though. You can come back and look at this later, okay? But the first thing you want to do in any of your treatment is get sleep, whatever it takes. I give you some prescription and herbal options here. And if these don't work, take a look at down here at Sleep 101 Basics, where I give you a lot more ideas of what to do, okay? All right. Number 2, I like people to be on a paleo diet, and I even have one listed here that you can take a look at. Number 3, knock your cytokines down. I talked about cytokines earlier tonight. You need to knock them down to feel better, but you're knocking them down also because it decreases immune suppression, okay? Number 4, be on an adaptogen, something that helps your body deal with the stress of this illness. Number 5, regulate your hormones. And I talk about ways to figure out, do you have a hormonal problem and what can you do on your own? Right. Number 6, be on a good multivitamin. Number 7, get your yeast out. And in here, I even tell you how to figure out if you have too many yeast. Number 8, treat your Lyme infection. Number 9, do some basic detox work. Not heavy metal detox, but basic detox. Treat your co-infections, okay? And in the end, only, I'm saying 6 months and beyond, and maybe even say 9 months and beyond now. Then, if that's all this other stuff is not working, then here's the other stuff you might want to consider doing, including looking for heavy metals, okay? So I don't look at it as one of the first things I do. It's something that I do later if everything else, if the big ticket items that I mentioned here are not working for you, okay? Hello, Randy. Let's see. You've been on diflucan and nystatin for 27 days. How will I know in 3 days if the yeast is gone or if I should continue taking them? Also, how long can you take Banderol Cemento 30 drops twice a day? Do you pulse them after a certain amount of time? Does your body get immune to them after a certain amount of time? All right. So about Banderol Cemento. So everyone, those are 2 herbal product names by Nutramedics for cat's claw, which is Cemento, and Banderol is Otoba bark extract, okay? And those 2 herbs have some petri dish experiments that show that they work effectively to kill all 3 forms of the Lyme germ, and that they also remove 100% of biofilm. Based on that research that came out about 6 years ago, I added those to my treatment, and I find that they work effectively 85 to 90% of the time, okay? So, however, what I will let you know is Nutramedics, who manufactures Banderol Cemento, I think has gotten greedy here all of a sudden. And they now are no longer allowing their products to be sold online. You have to go to their website directly to get them. And they have really jacked their prices up, okay? So I've got substitute products that I'm working with now that I think are even better quality and lower cost. They're made by a company called Wildcraft Herbs, and you can find them at Marty Ross MD supplements. It's Otoba bark extract and cat's claw, and a lot less costly. You'll see when you go there, okay? I have them in 2-ounce bottles, a lot less costly and working just as well, all right? Or I think they're going to work just as well, I should say, all right? Anyhow, how long can you use cat's claw and Otoba bark extract? As long as it's working. And so what I find is I've had people on them for 9 months, a year, year and a half sometimes. And I'll use them as long as I keep seeing progress in how a person is doing. Can a person get resistant to them? Yeah, I will change them sometimes. If I've been on them for a while and a person starts getting worse or we stop having progress, then I might go ahead and change them to different herbal products or prescription products, okay? But I have seen them last a long time. I've used, I think the longest I've had a person on it before is a year and a half to even 2 years, okay? So I think they can be useful. And again, I wouldn't get so caught up in the Banderol Cemento. I think you have some lower cost options out there now that NutriMedics has decided to really way overprice their product, okay? So anyhow, take a look at that, all right? And then in terms of, let's see here. Oh, in terms of treating yeast, how do you know you're done? Well, you look and see, are your yeast symptoms better, okay? So those yeast symptoms would be sugar cravings, intestinal gasiness and bloating, vaginal itching, vaginal discharge, pimples and acne. I went through some of that earlier with you, okay? And if those things generally are all better compared to where they were when you started, you're probably done. If not, if you haven't gotten any better with any of those symptoms, consider that the diflucan isn't working. There are times we see that yeast are resistant to the diflucan, okay? Or if you got partly better, but you're not all the way better with those yeast symptoms, sometimes you need an additional 30 days. All right? Hope that gives you an answer to that question. And good luck to you. Should I do a quick screen share here? Take a look at these wildcraft herbs. They're manufactured out of British Columbia, up in Canada, and they're being done in a higher potency alcohol extraction. So there's more active chemical in these. The alcohol that they're extracted into is organic, non-GMO, and the manufacturer of these is doing a good job to source for organic herbs or wildcrafted herbs. Okay, so these are the current alternatives that I'm using to the NutriMedics products. Over time, you're going to see that I'm going to be adding a bunch more from wildcraft herbs that will fill out, basically cover most of the Buhner protocol and most products that are found within the Cowden protocol as well too. But this is what we're starting with here at Marty Ross MD supplements. Okay, these would be your alternatives that are good quality product and probably much lower cost than what you're going to find in the NutriMedics products. All right, let's go back here. Hello, Elizabeth. Let's see. What can I do for issues with herniated disc? Is it okay to supplement with collagen protein? So herniated disc is not going to change the approach that you would do for Lyme. Basically, with a herniated disc, often with 6 weeks of conservative management, if it's a new herniation, if you don't do anything surgical, and if you don't use steroids, do not use steroids. If they try to give you steroids, pills that is, to decrease the disc herniation, the pressure on your nerves, don't do it because Lyme could get more active, okay? So generally, conservative management, which means be on anti-inflammatories like an Aleve or Motrin or diclofenac. Any of the prescription anti-inflammatories are going to help work that inflammation down. And usually over the course of 6 weeks, most herniated disc symptoms will get better because the inflammation of that disc and the inflammation of the nerves created by the disc pushing on them go down with your anti-inflammatories and go away. And you don't need to do anything special, okay? Beyond that, I don't have anything in particular. Just don't do steroids because they can really cause Lyme to get more active by suppressing the immune system, okay? Now, one caveat. Sometimes you can, if you still have a lot of nerve compression by a disc, sometimes they may want to do injection of steroids right around the nerve. And I think in a limited way, I think that probably is okay. I tend not to see Lyme get active from that. It's just I don't want you to do steroid pills to get that inflammation down, okay? Because they go systemically in a bigger degree than what those injections around your spinal fluid do, okay? Or it's called an epidural spinal injection or steroid injection. All right. Thanks for that question, Elizabeth. Good luck to you. Hello, Robin. Let's see. What does a positive ELISA and chronic post-Lyme mean, with or without reflexive Western blot? So ELISA probably doesn't mean anything. So ELISA testing, everyone, is a method to see, do you have any antibodies in you that might be made against Lyme? Okay, it's a good test. And when it comes back positive, it doesn't prove you have Lyme antibodies. It just says that some of them might be Lyme antibodies. And then the way that we're supposed to determine if they are antibodies that are being made against Lyme is to do a Western blot, okay? So an ELISA test is not a perfect test. It can stay positive for other reasons, even not having Lyme, for instance, okay? So what does it mean? It's hard to say what it means in terms of your Lyme, okay? All right. Thanks for our question, Robin. Good luck to you. Hello, Michelle. Is there a supplement that would help with inflammation in the brain? Yeah, so brain inflammation is being triggered by your infections. So make sure you're treating your infections. Okay, number one. All right. Number two, brain inflammation is due to two chemicals. One is inflammatory cytokines made by white blood cells in response to having Lyme in you. Okay. And also the white blood cells in the brain also make another chemical called quinolinic acid that is kind of toxic to the brain, actually. Okay. And what does a good job lowering quinolinic acid and also lowering those inflammatory cytokines is curcumin, that curcumin I was talking to you about earlier tonight. But you want to do a liposomal variety, and you want to take at least 500 milligrams 3 times a day. Okay. And for that, again, I like the Thorne product, the Mariva 500 by Thorne. The other thing you might want to consider is glutathione, which is a very powerful antioxidant made in every one of our cells. It helps repair injury to those cells. Okay, it's the great fixer for any injury that happens to our cells, but it also removes toxins that can help decrease inflammation too. Okay, and for the glutathione, what I would do is I would take 400 to 500 milligrams of a liposomal variety, and I would do that once or twice a day. And for that, I like the Tri-Fortify product. All right, all right. Good luck to you, Michelle. Hello, Liz from Hong Kong. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Ross. I was bitten in July 2017 by a tick in the Hamptons. Not. Here's the rest of that question. Let's see. I was bitten by a tick in July 7th. No EM, but symptoms started in October, November. Okay, so first of all, EM means erythema migrans, which is the bullseye rash, okay? And 50% of the time that somebody has Lyme, they don't get a bullseye rash, all right? Having a tick bite in the Hamptons is a big risk of getting Lyme. I haven't seen the studies in that region, but the closest studies we have would be New Jersey studies, where we know about 95% of ticks carry Lyme. I would bet it's pretty similar up and down Long Island and up in the Hamptons as well too. Okay, so you're at a high risk, especially where you got your tick bite. You're at a huge risk of getting Lyme. Okay, but symptoms started in October, November. Neck and joint pains, headaches, pain behind my left eye, brain. Tested 2 times. Negative VE positive. I'm not sure what you mean by that. Is it too late at 8 months to take antibiotics? Do the immunotest help? What? All right, I'll just make a few comments here, Liz. I don't see where the rest of your question is, okay? So it's not too late to treat. Your best chance of getting rid of Lyme is actually in the first month that you get bitten by the tick. If you could get started on antibiotics right in that time, there would have been 90% chance that you wouldn't have any more problems. Okay. If you start getting treated at a year or more, I don't think we ever get rid of every germ, but you can still have a good chance of getting well. And between a month and a year. I think there's a lot of people that if we get started on antibiotics, we can wipe the germ out completely. They'll never have problems again. But there's a group of people, especially as you get closer to that 1 year mark, that it gets harder to wipe out all the germs and not have any problem anymore. All right. All right. So in terms of what you've described here, the symptoms say Lyme disease to me. The tick bite in the Hamptons, where a large number of ticks carry Lyme, say Lyme disease to me. Even if your testing came back negative, I think you should get treated. I think clinically this is Lyme disease. And ultimately, Lyme disease is always a clinical diagnosis, okay? All right, so I would get treated, all right? I wouldn't even wait for the immunoblot test to come back. I would get treated now if you can get somebody to start treating you, okay? All right, now the immunoblot test, if you're talking about the one that's done by IGeneX, IGeneX does a method. So what the immunoblot by IGeneX does is they grow Lyme proteins in the lab genetically, okay? And then they modify a couple of them to remove amino acid segments that might be found on virus infections, so that if antibodies get stuck on, so then in the testing technique, then what they do is they try to see, do you have antibodies that stick on these genetically grown proteins of Lyme that they've grown in the lab, okay? And because they cleaned out amino acid sequences that were for viruses, if you have antibodies stuck on these proteins, they probably really are Lyme antibodies. They're not antibodies that were made against viruses that happen to attach to the Lyme proteins on the test, all right? In a Western blot that is done by IGeneX, they don't modify those proteins. So sometimes, especially on protein 31 and on 34 and on 41, if you have antibodies stuck on those proteins on a Western blot, there's a chance they could be stuck on those because of amino acid sequences from other germs, okay? But on an immunoblot that is being done by IGeneX, those bad amino acid sequences are removed, and so therefore your chances of getting a false positive are improved, okay? The immunoblot that's being done by IGeneX will find Lyme if you have it 91% of the time. It's probably the best Lyme test we have going right now. Okay, it's a more expensive test than their Western blot technique, though. All right. All right. So I would probably treat you, number one, and I wouldn't even wait for your test to come back. You might still want to get the IGeneX immunoblot test so that you have some proof that you have Lyme, and it makes it easier to keep going forward with treatment. Okay. And then in terms of what to take a look at my successful treatment recipe. I tell you, or the Ross Lyme treatment protocol. Okay, I give you some antibiotic ideas there to start with. You can take a look at my Lyme disease antibiotic guide. But again, make sure you're doing all those components of the Ross Lyme treatment protocol, because you need to fix all of those things to ultimately get over Lyme. All right? Okay. Good luck to you. Let's see. Hello, Jeannie. Let's see. I've recently developed all over body twitching and limb jerking as I'm falling asleep. Also, a weird adrenaline rush that wakes me up just as I'm nodding off. Is that a Lyme symptom? You know, I don't know that I would call it specific for Lyme. I have had some of my Lyme patients that have had symptoms like that, okay? And I don't have a good solution for it other than treating Lyme, and sometimes you have to be on sleep herbs or sleep medicines, using those to prevent that. All right? All right. Good luck to you, Jeannie. Thank you for that question. Hello, Barb. Let's see. Hi, Doc Marty. And thank you. You're welcome. Would you please review the herbals that treat all three forms of Lyme? Yeah. So you can either use cat's claw coupled with Otoba. I mentioned that earlier. Those will work effectively about 85 to 90% of the time. I'm also using the Biocidin product that I mentioned earlier. And if you're trying to treat Lyme rather than intestinal problems, I would use their liposomal variety, which is Biocidin LSF. It can treat all three forms of Lyme and remove biofilms, just like the Otoba and the cat's claw can. Okay, so that's an option for you too. I've got that article you can read about Biocidin. All right. All right. And I think it's probably going to be working about 85 to 90% of the time. I've only been using it, though, for about 4 or 5 months. So it's a bit early for me to tell you the full success rate on the biocidin, but I will tell you the Petri dish experiments look impressive, okay? And that's why I'm using it a lot these days. I know that my colleagues are having good success with it as well too. All right. All right. Other herbs that I will use, I sometimes will use teasel root. Teasel, and I may use andrographis sometime. Individually, I find those only help about 40 to 50% of the time. They're kind of my fallback herbs if nothing else is working. Okay. So that kind of gives you an overview. Another herb that you might use is Sitta acuta. But Sitta, again, by itself, I think is only going to work about 40 or 50% of the time. All right? All right. Good luck to you, Barb. Thank you for that question. Oops. I think I answered that earlier. Hi, Robin. I like your question. Some doctors think they are kings at treating Lyme because they have treated 1 or 2 patients for acute Lyme. What really makes a good Lyme doc? You know, I got to tell you, it takes time to get proficient at this illness. I would say it took me, so in treating Lyme, I think the better doctors are ones that know how to say, I don't know, and are willing to talk with other colleagues that have been treating it longer. Okay. And that's how I had to do it when I first started. And so, but I would say it took me about 1 year to 2 years to learn the ins and outs of the complications of this illness before I would say I was fully proficient. Up until that time, I wound up having to have regular calls to a number of my colleagues that would treat Lyme and just say, hey, I've got this patient. This is what's going on. I'm trying to figure out what to do for them. All right. So the only thing I would say to you is it takes time. It takes time of seeing things come in, people with symptoms that come in again and again, and figuring out what works and spending time studying the illness as well too. All right. All right. Good luck to you, Robert. Thank you for that question. Hello, David. Let's see. Are there dosage changes with the new cat's claw and Otoba bark tinctures? Good question. I'm not certain yet. I'm still having people start at the 5 drops 2 times a day. I'm not changing that. But be aware, I think they may be a bit more potent. And so if you are already on the Nutrimetics, the reason I think they're more potent, number one, they're using a plant to liquid ratio that's higher, okay? From what we can tell from the Nutrimetics products, they use a plant to herb ratio of about 1 to 6. The new herbal products, the Wildcraft herb products, some of them are a 1 to 3, 1 to 4 blend. Okay, you have to look on the label. They tell you on each one of those. All right, so they may be more potent that way, and they may be more potent because of having a higher alcohol extraction. However, I'm still trying to, I'm working with these. I'm trying to make sure, okay? For now, I haven't told people to adjust the dosage when they start out. I'm still having people start at 5 drops 2 times a day. But as many of you know, when I have people start on these herbs, I tell you to advance by 1 drop per dose every other day and not to increase if you start getting a Herxheimer reaction. You stay at that same dose for a while so we can regulate it going up. If, however, you're changing over and you've already been on 30 drops twice a day, I think you can still start at a 30 drops twice a day. Just realize they are more potent. You might get a Herxheimer reaction on it, okay? And I may report back to you later as I see how people handle these new herbs, but in theory, they should be a bit more potent than what the Banderol Cemento products were from Nutrimetics, all right? All right. Thanks for that question, David. I think we already answered that. Hello, Bridget. Let's see. I have autonomic failure and chronotropic incompetence as a result of Lyme disease. I had treatment with combination of antibiotics for more than 12 months. Some of my symptoms have disappeared, some improved. My Lyme literate medical doctor is of the opinion that the infection is under control. My immune system has recovered. My cardiac symptoms persist. I had a pericardial effusion at the beginning of my illness. Bridget, I'm trying to see if I can find another part to your question. Unfortunately, I'm not seeing another part to your question, so I don't know how to answer that. Good luck to you. I'm sorry about that. Hello, Kim. Hello, Dr. Ross. Do you find a glucose level 110 fasting to be bad? It seems like my glucose keeps going up. I'm on rifampin, Bactrim, and Malarone pulsing. Any idea how to lower my glucose? Okay, so technically, diabetes is a fasting blood sugar of 125 or higher. Okay, and then when we treat, we try to get in diabetes blood sugar levels fasting so that they are under 100. 110 technically is a little bit high, but in terms of could it harm you or is it harming you right now? Probably not. I think you got bigger fish to fry, and I probably would not do anything special for that 110 fasting. That's just how I am in my practice. All right? All right. Good luck to you. Hello, Catherine. Do you recommend Buhner's full herbal protocol for Lyme? Buhner's herbal protocol is very extensive and therefore very expensive. He uses a lot of herbs in his protocol. I think that there are more effective ways and lower cost ways of going at it. I would take a look at my treatment protocol, for instance, the Ross Lyme support protocol. Take a look at those key steps. I think it's a lot more cost effective than what Buhner's full herbal protocol is. I also think that it tends to work a bit better in the majority of cases, okay? However, I think Buhner's protocol can be effective for many people, all right? It's just, boy, he uses a lot of plants and it is expensive, all right? Those are my thoughts on that. Good luck to you, Catherine. Hello, Dennis. I have Lyme and chlamydia pneumoniae. Tested positive. Main symptom is shortness of breath, air hunger. In 99% of the cases, I get it in relaxing situations. Is this usual? My MD wants to put me on azithromycin, artemisinin, and minocycline. Do you agree on this treatment? Okay, so chlamydia pneumoniae, let me make a comment about that. So chlamydia pneumoniae is an infection that is common in healthy people. And in most of us, it is an infection that our immune system does not get bothered or that keeps under control. It is a respiratory infection. Usually will give us more like an acute bronchitis that goes away. Once that germ is in us, it just kind of lives in our cells, and the majority of people does not cause a problem. So just testing positive for it does not mean it is a problem for you. I want to be very clear about that, okay? And the symptoms of chlamydia pneumoniae are more like bronchitis rather than air hunger symptoms, all right? Air hunger, which is that symptom, that feeling you just cannot get enough air in, is a symptom that you can sometimes see with Bartonella or Babesia. You can see it in either one, all right? Now, I would need to ask you a lot more questions to help figure out, do I think you have Babesia? But generally, Babesia symptoms include night sweats, drenching night sweats, that is, anxiety or panic attacks, headaches in the front of the head. Some people with Babesia have very frequent deja vu experiences, like weekly or even multiple times a day. Also, Babesia can give you air hunger. It can give racing and skipping of the heart. It can give experiences where you feel like you're going to pass out. And it sometimes can give you these little cherry red blood spots under your skin. Okay, that's Babesia. If you have a lot of those or a number of those, I would agree with treating for Babesia. Is artemisinin coupled with azithromycin something you could do? And minocycline help with Babesia? Yes. However, the artemisinin that your doc is doing with you here, if you use it daily for over 3 days, the intestines develops an enzyme that can deactivate it, all right? So I usually use my artemisinin a different way. And the way I use it is I have people start at 300 to 400 milligrams 3 times a day for 3 days on, and then take 11 days off. Okay, that way this enzyme that deactivates it in the intestines can go away. Also for Lyme on this regimen, I don't see anything here that your MD is using that will treat cyst Lyme, and I would go ahead and add into that grapefruit seed extract, 250 milligrams, one pill 2 times a day. All right, so those are my thoughts for you, Dennis. If you want to see, I'm going to do a quick screen share here. The chapter on how to diagnose, where I have an article about how do you diagnose Babesia. It's this article right here. Okay, take a look at that. Okay, and then if you're anyhow, so I would take a look at that. Okay, all right. Now I got to do one thing here real quick. Bear with me, everyone. I got to steal a URL here. All right, got that. Do something administratively here behind the scenes. Just a minute here. Okay, got that. All right. All right, so that is it for me tonight, everyone. We've been together here for an hour and a half. I am going to be here with you again next week if you'll join me. In a second here, I'm going to take you over to Treat Lyme, where you can subscribe to the Treat Lyme book to read some of those articles that I pointed out tonight. Keep in mind, when you subscribe, you're supporting my work to be able to write and produce higher quality content for you and to keep running these webinars as well, too. So I appreciate if you would subscribe to the book. So I'm going to, here in a second, I'm going to redirect you over to the Treat Lyme book where you can do that. Also, at Treat Lyme, you can go ahead and sign up for next week's webinar, okay? Keep an eye out on your email tomorrow morning. Somewhere around 6:30 in the morning, you will have an email from me saying that the recording is ready with a link for how you view that too, okay? Good night, everyone. Been good visiting with you here tonight.